Hello, and welcome to our next segment in the Getty's Sing Book. Today we're going to be looking at Chapter 6, which has some of the most important concepts in the whole book pertaining to corporate worship. This chapter starts off, though, by talking a little bit about the importance of unity as a church congregation in our corporate worship. I've noticed that as this pandemic that we're in starts to level out a bit, that there is growing, I guess you could say, animosity between two camps, and that is the camp that wants to reopen everything as soon as possible, and then the other camp which is a little more cautious and guarded and wants to make sure everything's taken care of. Now, I'm not here to advocate one side or another of that argument, but I wanted to use this as sort of an illustration that relates to our worship in the same way. Now, the truth is, between those two arguments, there's probably a middle ground that's probably the smartest way to go about it. Likewise, in worship, there are some folks that prefer more reverence in worship, other folks that prefer more celebration in worship. There are many different opinions, and a lot of times we accentuate the differences and we become very polarized. It's us versus them. Just like with the pandemic argument and the worship argument, there becomes that same sort of negativity and polarization. But the Gettys begin this chapter by basically saying we need to focus on our commonalities and the things that unite us, like the headship of Christ, our belief in his teachings, among other truths. This chapter is called Sing with the Local Church, and of all the chapters, this one hurt just a little bit to read because of the achings of our hearts to have this experience again as soon as possible. There's a sweet example in this particular chapter told by Krysten Getty about a lady that is bound to a wheelchair. And in the church services, when the congregational singing began and everyone would stand up, she was sort of left out because she could not physically stand. But what she would do is that she would reach up and grab her husband's hand at that moment as sort of her sign of unity and solidarity with everyone else. She couldn't physically stand, but that was her way of standing in her heart. And as I read this, I was really moved because there's a great parallel to us in this separation we have because of social distancing in our worship. We can't be together physically, but yet we can still do things to stay connected. We can sing in our hearts even if we're not singing out loud in our homes, which there's nothing wrong with singing out loud in your homes, as I've said before. We can still do things that are important, that are encouraging to one another. We can call each other. We can share links of music that we like that moves us with our friends and those that we're close to. We can share the links to the actual worship services that are live streaming from here at Forest Hills Baptist as ways that we can stay connected. Now, this chapter talks a bit about the active quest of churches to reach millennials. Now, I'm not going to camp out in this specific area, but one of the themes that comes up in this discussion that we need to be reminded about is authenticity and the power it has to reach anyone, not just millennials. And many things that I've come across in my readings and studies about church growth and worship over the years, one universal truth sort of goes to the top of that. And that is, it's important as a church and as an individual to be true to yourself to some degree. A church has its own DNA, its sort of makeup, its history that made it who it was. A different library of congregational songs exists for every congregation that there is. And you don't have to have a certain type of architecture, a certain type of instrument in your band. If people are truly worshiping, truly connecting, and truly serving guests, visitors, no matter if they're millennial or if they're boomer or if they're Gen Xer like myself, guests to a church will see that. And the Lord sees that as well. And the Spirit's movement in this will be truly invigorating. It's not about always checking off the boxes of what churches are doing today. You don't have to do that. People can see through that level of transparency, that level of things that are just being done just because everybody else is doing it. And we need to guard against that. Whenever the thought crosses your mind today, or any day, that about a service or a time in your life when you were not getting anything out of worship? If we're honest, it happens to all of us. This has caused many folks in the past, and maybe you were one of those folks in the past, that were a church hopper, that something would happen, there was a set of circumstances, and you'd move around in a never-ending quest for the unicorn of the perfect church. Now, I'm not judging anybody that has happened to, because we all have different levels of our spiritual maturity and different levels of places in our lives when we've explored different churches, different denominations, and that sort of thing, and that's okay. But we have to admit that there are no perfect churches. Instead, in your own church, a church that you're committed to, try to strive to serve more, to humble yourself more, and rejoice when others around you are connecting during a song that you may not be connecting with. And begin to think more about the us and less about the I. And then your eyes will be therefore opened more about our shared mission together. Again, bringing it back to unity and how that's important. We don't always have to agree about the music choices or some of the other things that we tend to bicker about, but we don't need to write off a friendship, a fellowship, a music ministry, a church, because of some of the minute differences that we may have in preference. In closing, we need to do both of what the Gettys call songs for the moment and songs worth keeping. And this is more than just a traditional and contemporary distinction. Some songs are with us for a season to help us express a desire or a challenge in the faith for that time. Other songs have themes within it that stand the test of time. Both are okay. And I mentioned before, we may not know now which categories that particular song will fall in. So, let's sing them both with vigor. Let's sing them both with the passion that comes with a saved life. And something else is brought about in this chapter, and it's something I've always believed in a congregational context, when we are singing together, it's okay if you're off key or off rhythm. As long as we're united in singing and that you are singing with passion and vigor, because again, people are watching. People are seeing how we're connected to the Spirit and how we're connected to each other. And our engagement in worship corporately is something that's a sign that shows our connectedness to the Lord. So sing with vigor, sing with passion, sing with heart, even if it's a song that you don't like, or maybe especially because it is, because you may end up connecting with it in a way that's new and fresh for that day. God bless you today. And in the next chapter, we're going to be talking about music as an evangelism tool in reaching the lost. And we sort of danced into that in our discussion today. I hope you'll join us for that. We're trying to organize this video series and the Pastors Eats with Sinners series as playlists on YouTube as well, so you can binge watch them in order back to back if you choose. We'll see you next time.